April 8, 1943. At 27,000 feet above Caen, France, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermikin's smirk showed through his oxygen mask as he watched the awkward silhouettes laboriously climbing toward his formation through the crystal-clear canopy of his FW-190A5. The 26-year-old veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 carefully studied the American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe. "These armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he radioed to his wingman, barely containing his laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolt struggling to gain altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in tight formation. Their 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney are 2,800 double Wasp engines straining against their 7-ton weight. To German pilots, accustomed to the sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these corpulent American aircraft seemed almost comical. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, wings that appeared too small for their massive bodies, and propellers larger than anything in the Luftwaffe's inventory. What Hermikin didn't know, and what none of the German pilots circling like wolves above could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of a weapon that would systematically devastate the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of ridicule into instruments of terror, their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns becoming the most feared sound in the German skies. The mathematics of destruction were already built into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition with a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to shred a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blay, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for an attack. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had transferred from RAF Spitfires just weeks earlier, understood something his men did not yet know. Survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design philosophy. While the Germans pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climbing and turning, Republic Aviation had created something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that used mass, power, and firepower to redefine the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots scattered across the French sky that morning were men who would become legends, future aces whose names would strike fear into the hearts of the Luftwaffe. But on April 8, 1943, they were novices in an untested machine, facing the world's most experienced fighter force. The Germans had been at war continuously since 1939, fighting in Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans had seen exactly 0 days of combat. This story is about how industrial logic overcame tactical brilliance, how quantity and quality merged into overwhelming superiority, and how German pilots' laughter turned to terror once they discovered what synchronized Browning machine guns could do to an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. What Kartveli designed instead was a monster that redefined what was possible. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli admitted to his design team, "but a dinosaur with good proportions." The XP-47B prototype first flew on May 6, 1941, shocking everyone who saw it. At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. The massive turbo-supercharger system, with complex ducting running through the rear fuselage, gave it an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably asked the same question: does this thing actually fly? Not only did it fly, but it also performed unlike anything else at high altitude. The Pratt & Whitney are 2,800 double Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasped for air. Its turbo-supercharger, powered by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where the air was too thin for conventional superchargers. Major Hubert Hubska, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially despised the aircraft. His unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in the first months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled on takeoff, and dove with such intensity that pilots discovered compressibility effects, with controls freezing as shock waves formed on the wings. But those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, described his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 confirmed every German prejudice. The P-47s couldn't outturn the FW-190s, couldn't climb faster than the Bf-109s, and couldn't match their nimble handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly developed tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below, where the heavy Thunderbolt struggled, and forcing turning fights, where agility mattered more than firepower. Hauptmann Joseph Pips Priller, commanding officer of JG-26, reported to headquarters after his first encounter. The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys call them Indiana, fat targets pretending to be warriors. The statistics initially seemed to confirm German confidence. In their first month of operations, the American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested that the Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots joked that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something unusual was happening that German intelligence failed to notice. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before falling. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have destroyed a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have grounded a liquid-cooled fighter. More significantly, when P-47s got their guns on target, the results were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's weapons created a convergence zone of destruction that German pilots had never experienced. Unlike rifle-caliber weapons of early war fighters or limited ammo cannons, the American fighter could sustain fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. The turning point that began altering German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Lazo, France. It involved 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron in an encounter that became legendary on both sides. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 FW-190s from 2/JG-26, led by Headman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a perfect attack, diving from the sun with overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire, taking catastrophic damage in the first seconds. 20mm cannon shells tore through his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was ripped away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel, tried to bail out, only to find the canopy jammed by a shell that welded it shut. Trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet, what happened next defied all assumptions about combat damage tolerance. Despite no forward visibility through the oil-smeared windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shook violently, and controls responding only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and head toward England. The P-47 continued flying with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to debris. Then it got worse. A lone FW-190 from 2/JG-26 spotted the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. Historical research has never definitively identified this German pilot, although several names have been suggested based on combat reports from that day. What followed became one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, could only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the full cannon ammunition load. Then the German repositioned and fired again, this time only with his machine guns. Out of cannon shells, the German pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could clearly see his young, blonde face, the expression shifting from confidence to confusion to something resembling fear. The German emptied his remaining machine gun rounds into the Thunderbolt. Still it flew. He pulled alongside once more, shook his head in amazement, gave an informal salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another struck the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had taken direct hits. Control cables were partially severed, and 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through. Yet, the aircraft had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent shock waves through both air forces. American engineers studying the wreck realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving reports from 2/JG-26, initially refused to believe it. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment, but multiple pilot testimonies confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had survived everything the Luftwaffe's best fighters could deliver. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't try to turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use their weight. Use their power. Use their guns. The Thunderbolt's massive mass, initially considered a disadvantage, became a weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter, even in a vertical dive. This speed could be converted to altitude in a zoom climb, leaving pursuers helpless. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who would become one of the first American aces in Europe, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, nicknamed by pilots as the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters could operate effectively. When Luftwaffe aircraft appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that made deflection shooting impossible for the defenders. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would speak. German pilots who survived described it as facing a wall of lead. The combined firepower created an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this convergence didn't just fall, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower came during the August 17, 1943 dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to date. This mission showcased both the P-47's limitations, its range even with drop tanks, and its terrifying effectiveness when employed properly. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110 destroyers positioning to attack B-17s with heavy cannons and rockets. These twin-engine fighters were heavily armed but less maneuverable, specialized for bomber interception. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unifizia Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Bf-110s who survived, later recounted during interrogation. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then it fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage, tail severed, crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 100s and 10s were destroyed in less than a minute. The German pilots had never faced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At convergence distance, typically 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faced 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a demonstration of American industrial capacity. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammo, typically 120 to 200 rounds per 20 mm gun, American pilots could maintain fire for over 30 seconds. The standard combat load mixed armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in patterns designed to both destroy and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a Bf-109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was discovering another horrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained rated power up to 30,000 feet. German fighters relying on single or two-stage mechanical superchargers saw performance drop significantly above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, faced this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading JG-1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his FW-190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive FW-190 with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30 degrees deflection, observed strikes along the entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded, no parachute observed. Philipp's death sent shock waves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best aces, who had survived over 500 combat missions on both Eastern and Western fronts, couldn't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance did the average pilot have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report, delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943, was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, half-an-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 arrived in England, completing the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydraulic propeller with 13-foot diameter broadcord blades that bit into the air like massive oars. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Earlier Thunderbolts had managed only about 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, but the new paddle blade propeller variants could reach 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The larger propeller also enhanced acceleration, letting P-47s build energy more quickly in level flight. Headman Heinz Noker of JG-11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered these new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. In his combat diary, he wrote, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than boost performance. It changed the Thunderbolt's sound. The distinctive thundering roar created by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds could be heard for miles. German ground troops reported identifying approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble signaling death from above. They began calling it the Donnerschlag, or thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. Standard configuration included two 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending the range beyond 1,000 miles. The paddle blade propeller provided enough performance for the Thunderbolts to fight effectively immediately after dropping tanks. The Luftwaffe's response was to target the bombers, hoping to inflict enough losses to halt the American daylight campaign. But that meant flying through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal task. German pilots developed a grudging respect bordering on fear for the big American fighters. Major Gunther Rall, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter on March 6, 1944, but was badly wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters. Just gone, transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death." Escort missions revealed another P-47 advantage: endurance. While German fighters burned fuel rapidly at maximum power, the big American radials cruised efficiently at high altitude. Thunderbolts could stay with bombers for hours, rotating top cover while keeping enough fuel for combat and return. As P-51 Mustangs arrived in spring 1944 for long-range escort duties, P-47 units increasingly focused on ground attack missions, making them among the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition accelerated in April 1944, ahead of the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine guns proved equally effective against ground targets. Standard armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, and the volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. 2 short bursts delivered 160 half-inch projectiles to an area the size of a truck. The addition of bombs and rockets transformed the P-47 into a multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pound bomb under the fuselage, a payload equal to early war medium bombers. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, VARs, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand. The Thunderbolts came in low, so low that soldiers could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, followed by the hammer of heavy machine guns. Columns of trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in a single pass. The psychological effect was devastating. Soldiers called them J-bows, fighter bombers, but these were something beyond, flying artillery with sniper-like accuracy. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe realized how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, forming an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of JG-21, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans." Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. "We tried to break through at dawn, 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain." In the weeks after D-Day, P-47s systematically destroyed German movements in daylight. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely limiting their ability to respond to Allied advances. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat: reinforced armor, more anti-aircraft guns, new camouflage techniques, but nothing worked. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and firepower made it nearly unstoppable. Even feared 88mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating Europe, the P-47 also proved its worth in the Pacific. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, found the Thunderbolt perfectly suited for the vast distances and harsh conditions. Colonel Neil Kirby of the 348th developed Pacific-specific tactics. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, shooting down 6 himself in a single mission, earning the Medal of Honor. Japanese pilots, used to fighting nimble but fragile American fighters, were unprepared for the P-47's firepower and durability. Ace Saburo Sakai wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying, streams of heavy bullets tearing planes apart." The P-47N, developed for the Pacific, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending range to 2,350 miles. This allowed escort of B-29s to Japan, showing how the short-legged fighter of 1943 evolved into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate vindication came in encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me 262, with a top speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been untouchable by propeller-driven aircraft. Yet Thunderbolt pilots discovered 2 opportunities to catch jets: during takeoff and landing, when jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me 262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The confident jet pilot never saw the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns opened at 400 yards. Meyer's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape." The concentrated fire of .50 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft. By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under certain circumstances. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47s, shot down 2 Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized firepower over speed. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our guns, and they come apart like paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them." The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Melsbroek, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially succeeded. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot pointed at the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He pointed to the flight line, where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for replacements, saying, "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47 D-40s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. American losses totaled 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields. all replaced within a week. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 components machined to tolerances of a thousandth of an inch. Yet American workers, many women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision exceeding peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, and with hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, consumption exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances of 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding through synchronized gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was enormous. Each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, up to 300 gallons per hour in combat with water injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944, all shipped across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more impressive was pilot training. By 1944, the United States graduated 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, more than Germany had trained in the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat, including 100 hours in advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, were entering combat with less than 100 hours total by war's end. The quality showed in combat. American pilots arrived in Europe trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemy's strengths and weaknesses. They knew their aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals German pilots never received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, exemplified this training advantage. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 in the P-47. I'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from actual combat. On my first mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. In March 1945, Oberleutnant Joseph Priller, the same pilot who had mocked the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years earlier, was interviewed by German propaganda officials. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication, revealed the complete transformation in German attitudes. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us, mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us with better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. Even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant facing P-47 formations dominating every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brechtender, One of the last German pilots trained in 1945 flew a single combat mission before the war ended. His encounter over Leipzig lasted only 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above for Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook as if hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely escaped. In my parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staff. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. German pilots developed what medical officers called Jabo fever, with physical symptoms of stress appearing when Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. The distinctive thunder of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops, who knew survival meant immediate cover. The final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 on the ground. 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, 68,000 trucks, and 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles were destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in combat, 150 on the ground, 1,500 vehicles, 150 locomotives, plus countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds, and launched 60,000 rockets. P-47 units achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial combat, while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these staggering numbers lay the human cost. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against Western Allied forces. Many fell to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience, while the average P-47 pilot had over 200. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center at Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence. Records captured in 1945 revealed the evolving German assessment of Allied aircraft. The file on the P-47, updated throughout the war, shows a dramatic reversal of opinion. April 1943, large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment, minimal threat. December 1943, exceptional high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength. Firepower increasingly problematic. Pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment, significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944, dominant fighter bomber. Superior to all German types above 20,000 feet, devastating firepower against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945, best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment, unsurvivable in direct engagement. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His recorded response captured the complete transformation of German opinion. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat. We said they built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win. They were right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, visibility excellent, controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany produced, yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. The P-47's design perfectly reflected American industrial philosophy, brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and overengineered. Wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. Engine mounts could withstand 12 G-forces. Control cables were doubled with automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel. 8 separate ammo boxes, each holding 425 rounds, fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during high-G maneuvers. Guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude, with individual charging mechanisms and adjustable convergence ranging from 150 to 400 yards for preferred engagement distance. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 won through quantity rather than quality, claiming German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numbers. Combat records told a different story. When numbers were equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved far more effective in practice. Gun camera analysis revealed why. Cannon shells, while individually more destructive, required precise aim and had limited ammo. The P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets, guaranteeing hits even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst put at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, sufficient for destruction. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds used delayed-action fuses to penetrate before detonation, with incendiary compounds burning at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, while heavier, often exploded on surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power than entire bomber formations from previous wars. Its weapons delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry. Yet it was built by the thousands, flown by young pilots barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who learned their trade in weeks. The transformation of German opinion from mockery to terror took less than 2 years. In that time, the flying milk bottle became the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones decades later. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Its placard lists specifications and battle honors. But the real story is told by a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under fire. Below the display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot taken from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you, and you ceased to exist." The laughter died with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In between, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots had laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.